Last chapter today, this is chapter 13. It is called King Beowulf. King Hylax's heart grew big with pride when he heard what Beowulf had done. Okay, we haven't heard about this king in a while. Remember, King Hylax is the king of the Geats. Okay, so you have King Hrothgar, who's the king of the Danes, and then you have King Hylax, which is king of the Geats. Beowulf had always been his favorite nephew, even when he was weak and a sickly youth, and no one else had any time for him. In those days, the wits at Hylax's court used to laugh at Beowulf, a silly boy, fancy getting himself stung by bees, and always mooning about, dreaming of adventures when he's not tall enough to win a tussle with a goat. He'll come to no good, you mark my words. Okay, hold on one second. So Beowulf, number one, remember he's built like a triangle, really wide shoulders, kind of short legs, looks taller sitting down than standing up. He was stung by all those bees, and remember it's because he had an obsession with bees. They were kind of his friends. And they're saying all of these people are like making fun of him because all he wants to do is go on these adventures, and nobody's really thinking he's going to amount to anything. Beowulf had come to some good now, and those same court wits had to eat their words when everyone learned what he had done against the monsters in the land of the Danes. King Hylax ordered the most splendid feast his country had ever seen, and all in honor of brave Beowulf. Beowulf was not greedy or ambitious. The gifts that Hrothgar had given him he passed on to Hylax. "You are my king," he said, "and I am your man. All that I won as your retainer, like just for you. You get to keep all these things. Here are horses. Here is more gold than a man can carry. It is all for you, dear uncle." He hesitated, and then he unbuckled the golden collar from about his neck, the Brisingamen collar that Queen Welchtheo had given him. He held it up to in the torchlight. It shone like a star cluster. "And this," said Beowulf, "I would give to you, dear aunt." Beowulf's aunt, Hylax's young wife, was Hyde, the daughter of Hareth. Queen Hyde was beautiful and wise, with a creamy brow and poppies in her cheeks. She took the collar gladly and thanked him for it. Hylax was so pleased and impressed by his nephew's courtesy that he granted to him as much land as he could cover in a day's ride on the white horse with the black mane. Okay, hold on one second. So Beowulf basically said, all of these gifts that I've been given, they don't really mean anything to me. I don't want them. So he gave them all to the king, who is his uncle. And the uncle basically says, like, "Dude, that's awesome. Thank you so much." And he says, "Here's my gift for you. You need to take your horse, and you are going to ride your horse for an entire day. And as far as you go, that's how much land you can have." Remember, land is like a currency during this time, right? You get a bunch of land, and then people can live on it, and it's a big deal. The mare flew over stone and stream and meadow, and by that sundown Beowulf was master of a greater estate in the land of the Geats than anyone save the king himself. So basically, Beowulf has more land than anybody in the land of the Geats except for the king. The king still has more. The only gift that Beowulf kept was the golden ring Queen Welchtheo had put on his finger after the slaying of Grendel. He could not bring himself to part with this. A few years passed in peace. Oh, okay, so get myself together. We're now a few years past this whole entire thing. Beowulf lived quietly, doing country things. He took to the keeping of bees, and most days would see him tending his tawny hives in the sun. The bees never stung him. They were big bees, too, armed with the kind of venom that could kill if one was unfortunate enough to be attacked by the whole swarm. But Beowulf had a way with them, and the bees seemed to love him. Sometimes he would dust his cheeks with pollen and sprawl in the sun, and the bees used to come humming and crawl all over his face, so that anyone seeing him would swear he was wearing a mask of gold and black. He drank wine from a silver cup, never got drunk, and was very happy. Hold on. First of all, remember his eyesight is bad because he was stung when he was a child by bees. I don't know. I feel like I would have a hard time going back to that. But now, like, he's by himself, and what is he doing? He's tending to his bees, putting pollen on his cheeks, laying down and letting these bees, like, crawl all over him. Then the peace was broken. The land of the Geats was invaded by the Frisians. Those are the French. The Frisians were fierce and cunning. They came in the night, their long ships creeping up the moonlit fjords. They burned and they plundered. They left death everywhere they went. But they always packed back to their ships and sailed away before Hygelac or Beowulf could catch them. Sneaky guys. The king grew angry at these tricks. He led his men in a counterattack. He burned whole villages in Friesland for revenge, but returning to his ship, he was trapped in an ambush. Hygelac fought desperately, for life was dear to him, but the Geats were outnumbered. Hygelac was killed. So they go in retaliation, right? They're trying to get these Frisians who keep coming onto their land, and as they went for attack, and then Hygelac was trying to get back to the ship, he's trapped and killed. Beowulf himself just managed to escape bearing his uncle's body when all seemed lost. He had to swim back home through a half-frozen sea. Queen Hyde was made sick with sadness at the loss of her husband. She was also worried because their only son, Hardred, was still a baby, unable to take more than a few faltering steps and say things like mama, mercy, pity, peace, mercy, pity, peace, mama. And she saw a bloody fight coming to determine who should rule the land, and so she asked the people to set aside their own son's claim to the throne and have Beowulf as king. So the next person that's supposed to be king is Hardred, this baby, but the queen is basically saying, he's not old enough, obviously, right? So, she asked the land, don't worry about this, let's let Beowulf be king. The Geats cheered loud and long when they heard this, but Beowulf said, no, I am no usurper. I do not want the crown while anyone lives who has a better right to wear it. Your feelings do you credit, said Queen Hyde. But tell me, how can my son be king when he can hardly talk? How will he rule? Who will listen to him? Beowulf knelt by the boy Hardred, who was playing with some blocks upon the floor. I will listen to him, he said seriously. The baby looked at him. Beowulf handed him a block. Mercy, said Hardred. A fit quality in a king, said Beowulf. He handed the boy another block. Pity, said Hardred. A wise virtue in a king, said Beowulf. He handed him a third block. Peace, said Hardred. The end and purpose of all kingcraft, said Beowulf. He clapped his hands. Hardred laughed for joy and dropped the blocks. Beowulf lifted him in his arms and set him on his shield, that he raised both shield and baby above his head. Long live Hardred, he cried. Long live any monarch who learns to speak of mercy, pity, and peace, while still in his mother's arms. People, behold your king. Beowulf will uphold and protect him as long as he lives. So Beowulf is basically saying, no, Hardred is not old enough to be king, but he knows something, so I am going to be his protector as he grows up. Hardred grew up to rule as a good king should. He was kind and firm and generous, brave in battle, gentle in the company of women, straight in his every dealing. Everyone was always welcome at his court. This unfortunately proved his undoing, for one day he was visited by the sons of Othere, the men who discovered the North Cape. They had quarreled with their father and rebelled against their uncle Ornella, king of Sweden. They wanted asylum, so they wanted a safe place to go. Hardred took pity on these two young men, doomed to wander the face of the earth because of a family feud. So these two men, who, you don't have to really worry about their names too much, but they got into a fight with their dad, the king of Sweden, or I lied, their uncle, the king of Sweden, and they basically kicked them out, right? And so they go to Hardred, who is king of the Geats, which is, So they go over to him, and he basically says, sure. But Hardred took pity on the two young men doomed to wander the face of the earth because of a family feud. He said they could stay at his court for as long as they wished. Their names were Eanmund and Eadgils, and they showed themselves genuinely grateful to Hardred for their hospitality. But when King Onella heard that his rebellious nephews had obtained sanctuary in Hardred's land, he flew into a rage. He tore at his beard and rolled on the ground in his fury. And then he took ship at the head of a band of fighting men and set sail for the kingdom of the Geats. So basically, King Onella was like, oh, no, you didn't, right? I sent these two guys off. They are supposed to basically die because they're no longer allowed in our area, and he's mad at Hardred for giving them safe spots. So now he's going to go fight the kingdom of Geats. Hardred was killed by Onella's axe in the bitter battle that followed. Oh no, the king is dead. Eanmund was killed too, and Eadgils fled away. But King Onella was reluctant to meet Beowulf face to face in mortal combat, and anyway, he had achieved what he had set out to do, and so he withdrew while things were still going well for him. After the battle, before the smoke had died from Hardred's funeral pyre, the Geats sent again to Beowulf, asking him if he would be king. This time he said yes.